What's up, Mustangs? Miss Titus here, and today what we're going to talk about is inverse operations and how they help us solve 1- and 2-step equations. The first thing that I want you to write down in your iPod is our definition for inverse operations. Inverse operations are operations that undo one another. Okay, so they're going to come in pairs, and the first set of inverse operations is addition and subtraction. Okay, so addition and subtraction undo one another. If I have a positive 3 and I want to undo that, I need to subtract 3. Just the opposite, if I have a negative 4, I need to add 4 in order to undo that 4 and end up with 0. Okay, the second set of operations that are inverses are multiplication and division. A times B is the opposite of A divided by B. Okay. The last set of inverse operations, and we're not going to actually talk about this till the end of the year, but we want to get it out of the way now, are squares and square roots. So the opposite of x squared is the square root of x. Okay? And whenever you see these, I want you to think back to your iPod to the properties of real numbers foldable, which is the salmon colored foldable. We talked about the inverse property, right? We said that the inverse property of addition, a plus negative a is 0, the inverse operation of multiplication, a times 1 over a, and we said that this is really just division. So we've already kind of talked about this. The inverse properties of real numbers are also all of our inverse operations. Now here's a couple of notes. Okay? We need to talk about the difference between addition and subtraction. Okay? Addition is a positive number by itself. So, we could say that x plus 3, this is addition, but also 3 plus x, because this 3 is a positive 3. That means that it's going to have it's an addition problem, which means the inverse would be subtraction. So both of these are positive 3's, and therefore it is addition. Same thing with subtraction. It's a term with a negative sign in front. Okay? So, for example, we have x minus b, right? This is a negative b, a minus b, that is subtraction, the inverse for which is addition. Also, negative b plus x. Even though this is addition, right here, since this is a negative b, it is subtraction. Okay? And how do we recognize multiplication? Well, we recognize multiplication by a number and a variable side by side. So, for example, bx. This is b times x. Okay? So here are inverse operations. We're going to use all of these to solve 1- and 2-step equations. So go ahead and turn to the next page in your iPod. It should be blank. You don't have anything written on it. You're going to write down the examples that I give you. So here's example number 1, and I'll zoom in so you can see it. Okay. Example number 1. x plus 2 equals 1. So when we solve equations, the whole goal is to isolate the variable. So I always want to identify my variable. So here's my variable right here. I have an x, okay? And I want to get x by itself. Okay. This equal sign here means that this side of the equation and this side of the equation are equal. Now, if we want to keep them equal, if we do anything on the left side of the equation, we also have to do it on the right side of the equation. So in order to isolate x, I want to do the inverse of plus 2. The inverse of plus 2 is minus 2. And like I just said, if I do it on the left side of the equation, I need to do it on the right side of the equation as well. Okay? Positive 2 and negative 2 undo one another, and all we're left with is x. 1 minus 2 is going to give us negative 1. And that is our solution for our equation. X plus 2 equals 1. And then if I plug it back in, negative 1 plus 2, that equals 1. So I know that I'm good. Okay. Example number 2. I'll give you a second to write it down. Negative 3 plus x equals 4. I always want to draw my line down my equal sign. Okay. I'm going to circle my variable. It's right here. Okay. I have an x, and then I have a 3. Now this is addition, but remember we said that since this is a negative 3, it's actually a subtraction. So the inverse of negative 3 is going to be positive 3 plus 3. And if I do it on one side of the equation, I have to do it on the other side of the equation. Okay. Negative 3 and positive 3 undo one another, and then I'm going to bring down my x. 4 plus 3 equals 7. So here my solution is x equals 7. And if I think about it, negative 3 plus 7, that's true. That's 4. So we know we're good. Okay, so we did an addition. We did a subtraction. Now we're going to do a multiplication. Okay, so we're solving for the variable x. We want to isolate the variable. So I'm going to circle my variable right here, and then I'm going to ask myself what's next to my variable. Well, it's a 3. And remember on our other side of our paper we just said to recognize addition it's going to be two terms next to one another. So this is multiplication. The inverse of multiplication, that's right, it's division. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. Now, you might freak out and you'd be like, oh, I don't know what that is. That's okay, we have a calculator. So I'm going to do 1/3 in parentheses divided by 3. That gives me 0.11111. I'm not writing that as an answer, so I'm going to change it to a fraction. I'm going to hit math, enter, enter, and I end up with 1/9. So x equals 1/9. Okay, that's example number 3. Moving on, example number 4. This is an example of division. So again, isolate the variable using inverse operations. Here's my variable. What operation do we have? Division. I have divided by 5. So what is the inverse of division? That's right, it's multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. Now, what happens when I multiply by 5 and I divide by 5? Well, if I multiply by 5 and divide by 5, I'm going to end up with 1. So, multiplication and division undo one another. The 5's are gone and all I'm left with is x. Now on this side I actually have to do 2 times 5, which is 10. So my solution is x equals 10. And that makes sense because 10 divided by 5 equals 2. Excellent. Okay, so let's do a two-step equation. Now, the thing that we need to remember for two-step equations is that we do PEMDAS backwards. It's going to be sad meep. Okay, PEMDAS backwards. So first we add and subtract, then we multiply or divide. Okay, so again, I want to isolate my variable using inverse operations. So here's my variable right here, x. Now I've got two things going on. I have this negative sign right here, and then I have a -4 over here. So what do we want to do first? Add and subtract. What is the inverse of -4? That's right, it's +4. And if we do it on one side of the equation, we have to do it on the other side. I'm going to bring down my negative x, and then in my calculator over here, I'm going to do negative 20 plus 4, negative 16. Okay, but we're not done yet because I don't want to know what negative x is, I want to know what x is. So remember, if there's a negative sign here, there is also an imaginary 1. This is a negative 1x. So if I want to get rid of a negative 1 next to an x and it's being multiplied, I have to use the inverse. What is the inverse of multiplication? Division. So I'm going to divide by negative 1 on this side, and I'm going to divide by negative 1 on this side. Negative 1 divided by negative 1. Inverse operations undo one another, so they're gone. And then I have negative 16 divided by negative 1. A negative divided by negative is a positive, and my answer is x equals 16. Okay, last example. We have a two-step equation. All right. Now, first things first, before I can subtract this 4, I have to get rid of this 3, okay? And then remember we said that this bar right here means division, correct? So in order to undo this big division by 3, I have to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication by 3. If I do it on the left side of my equation, I have to do it on the right side of my equation. Okay? So, what happens when you multiply by 3 and divide by 3? Those two things undo one another. And all we're left with is x plus 4. Negative 8 times 3 is going to give me negative 24. Alright, now we're next to our last step. We have an x right here. I need to get rid of a plus 4. The inverse operation for addition is subtraction. So I'm going to do the opposite and subtract 4. If I do it on one side, I have to do it on the other side. 4 and negative 4 undo one another, so they're gone. X equals negative 24 minus 4 is going to be negative 28. X equals negative 28. Alright, so that is solving one and two-step equations. Go ahead and fill out the form that accompanies this video, and make sure that you write down any questions that you have. If you have any questions about specific examples, I actually want you to write that in the comment section. So say I had a question about example number 3. And as always, remember, staying strong, and we'll see you in class.